Hello friends, good afternoon. This is Ruchira Vaidya and you are watching my CA Final Audit channel, that is for CA Final students in subject of auditing. Friends, in our last lecture we have done essay 320 which deals with the materiality. Now in this video I am going to cover about essay 330, that is the auditor's responses to assessed risk. Now first we will cover in this video is the scope and objective of this standard. Now what is the scope of this standard? Let's see. After assessing the risk of material misstatement in accordance with essay 315, that is essay 315, which deals with identifying and assessing the risk of material misstatement through understanding the entity and its environment. Now, what is the duty of the auditor? The auditor shall determine overall response to address the risk of material misstatement. For this purpose, the auditor should design and perform such audit procedures that may enable him to give response to this risk of material misstatement. The ultimate objective of this exercise is to enable the auditor to reduce the audit risk to an acceptably low level by obtaining the sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. Now we will see what are the overall responses to risk of material misstatement at the financial statement level. It includes the following, that is professional skepticism. The auditor and his audit team should need to maintain the professional skepticism throughout the audit. That is, the auditor should perform his duties and his audit team should perform his duties in such a manner that they should maintain the attitude of professional skepticism. A questioning mind should always come in their audit procedure. Then experienced staff. The auditor should assign more experienced staff or those staff with special skills, or he may use the experts to perform the audit. Providing more supervision. He should provide his best supervision through the entire process of audit. Now he should incorporate further audit procedures like incorporating additional elements of unpredictability in the selection of further audit procedures to be performed. He should also make general changes to the nature, timing and extent of audit procedures. For example, performing substantive procedures at the period end instead of an interim datum, or modifying the nature of audit procedures to obtain more persuasive audit evidence. Now we will see responses to assessed risk of material misstatement at the assertion level. Now first portion is about test of controls. Now what are the auditor's responses at the assertion level? We are going to see. First point covers operating effectiveness of internal controls. Now here the auditor shall design and perform test of controls when the auditor's assessment of risk of material misstatement at the assertion level includes an expectation that the controls are operating effectively, or substantive procedures alone cannot provide sufficient and appropriate audit evidence at the assertion level. It means that the auditor should always verify whether the internal control in the organization is operating effectively and efficiently. The second point is timing of test of control. The auditor shall test controls for the particular time or throughout the period. Next is using the audit evidence obtained during an interim period. When the auditor obtains audit evidence about the operating effectiveness of controls during an interim period, the auditor shall obtain audit evidence about significant changes to those controls subsequent to the interim period and determine the additional audit evidence to be obtained for the remaining period. The next point is using audit evidence obtained in previous audits. If based on the understanding of the entity and its environment, the auditor plans to rely on controls that have not changed since they were last tested, The auditor should test the operating effectiveness of such controls at least once in every third audit. He can use the previous audit evidence obtained in the previous audits to test the reliability of internal controls. But at least once in every 3 audits he should test it personally. Now, factors that may decrease the period for retesting a control or result in not relying on audit evidence obtained in previous audits include the following. Means the auditor should not rely on the audit evidence obtained in previous audits in the following circumstances, which are a weak control environment, weak monitoring of controls, a significant manual element to the relevant controls, when the personnel changes that significantly affect the application of the control, weak general IT controls, then changing circumstances that indicate the need for changes in the control. So these are the situations where the auditor should not rely on the audit evidence obtained in previous audits and should test them, gather the sufficient and appropriate audit evidence during the current audit performed by him and his team. The next point is controls over significant risk. When the auditor plans to rely on controls over risk the auditor has determined to be a significant risk, the auditor shall test those controls in the current period. Last point is evaluating the operating effectiveness of controls. The auditor shall evaluate whether misstatements have been detected by substantive procedures, indicate that controls are not operating effectively. Even though there are no identified misstatements, controls may not be effective. The auditor shall communicate material weaknesses in the internal control identified during the audit on a timely basis to management or those charged with governance at an appropriate level of responsibility as required by SA 265. Now these were the responses regarding to test of controls. See the responses to assess risk of material misstatement at the assertion level in case of substantive procedures. Now the auditor should design and perform substantive procedures as for each material class of transactions, account balance and disclosure. The substantive procedures related to the financial statement closing process. The auditor substantive procedures shall include the following audit procedures related to the financial statement closing process, such as agreeing or reconciling the financial statements with the underlying accounting records and examining material journal entries and other adjustments made during the course of preparing the financial statements. Now, substantive procedures responsive to significant risk. When the auditor has determined that an assessed risk of material misstatement at that assertion level is a significant risk, the auditor shall perform substantive procedures that are specifically responsive to that risk. When the approach to a significant risk consists only of substantive procedures, those procedures shall include test of details. Now, what will be the timing of substantive procedures? When substantive procedures are performed at an interim date, the auditor shall cover the remaining period. Now, we shall be seeing what is the sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. The sufficient and appropriate audit evidence, it means that the auditor should gather such audit evidence that is not only sufficient, that is not only quantity wise sufficient, but it is quality wise appropriate also to reduce the audit risk at an acceptably low level. Based on the audit procedures performed and the audit evidence obtained, the auditor shall evaluate the audit evidence before conclusion of the audit whether the assessments of the risk of material misstatement at the assertion level remain appropriate. The auditor shall conclude whether sufficient appropriate audit evidence has been obtained. The auditor, in forming an opinion, the auditor shall consider all relevant audit evidence regardless of whether it appears to be corroboratory or contradictory with assertions in the financial statements. The auditor, if the auditor has not obtained sufficient and appropriate audit evidence, then to a material financial statement assertion, he should attempt to obtain further audit evidence. If the auditor is unable to obtain further audit evidence, then the auditor shall express a qualified opinion or disclaimer of opinion in the auditor's report to the financial statements. Now, we will see what is the nature, timing and extent of audit procedures. Now, nature. The nature of further audit procedures refers to their purpose, test of controls or substantive procedures, and their type. That is, it includes inspection, observation, inquiry, confirmation, recalculation, reperformance or analytical procedures. A combined approach using both test of controls and substantive procedures is an effective approach. Now, what is timing? Timing refers to when the audit procedures are performed of the period or date to which the audit evidence applies. The auditor may perform test of controls or substantive procedures at an interim date or at period date. The higher the risk of material misstatement, the more likely is that the auditor may decide that it is more effective to perform substantive procedures nearer to the period end rather than at an earlier date. In considering when to perform audit procedures, the auditor should also consider the factors such as the control environment, when relevant information is available, the nature of the risk, the period or date to which the audit evidence relates. Now, extent. Extent refers to the quantity of audit procedure to be performed. For example, a sample size or the number of observations of a control activity. Now, in this scenario, we have learned what is the audit procedures. The auditor has to undergo what are the nature, timing and extent of audit procedures, what is sufficient and appropriate audit evidence, and in order to design the auditor's responses to assess the risk of material misstatement in the financial statements. I hope this video is clear. If you have any queries or doubts, please you can add in a comment and I will reach out to you. Have a good day ahead. Goodbye. Next lecture.